24, 25, 26, 27, 28. 428 scopes to choose from in this Cabela's catalog alone. That can try anybody trying to figure out what scope to select for their use. It's not a daunting task if you know what you're looking for and apply a few simple rules. So let's go down the list one by one. We're going to be just covering, in the scope selection criteria, we'll cover quality and price, your shooting style, whether you're a hunter, target shooter, plinker, small game hunter, what kind of cartridge and rifle you use, your realistic shooter ability, range calibrating reticles and BDC that you hear so much about these days, optical power, and your field of view. Those are important considerations. Everything here is relative to your scope selection. Your reticle pattern, the style of reticle, the crosshairs in other words. And as we get down through this list, you're going to find out that in reality less is more in the scope world. Okay, let's first start out with quality and price. Well, first of all, avoid, unless you're strictly involved with just nothing more than plinking tin cans, and your largest expenditure with your rifle is on a box of ammo every now and then, and you don't go afield, you know, where you're going to be expending money on game hunting guides, or maybe air flights, or even a local hunting trip to the Maine woods or something like that. Avoid bargain scopes. When you buy a $69.95 scope or $125 scope, you get what you bought, and that's about it. You're gonna have potentials for, and some of them are really nice. Don't get me wrong. You know, you can look down through Amazon's ratings or Midway.com's ratings, and you'll see some people are completely satisfied with the $69.95 scope that they bought. But by and large, I would warn them that just because it's adequate for their use, maybe for going plinking, I would not have such a scope if I've invested already a few $1,000s on, say, a hunting trip out in Wyoming or Montana. And when a scope fails out in the middle of Montana, you don't have too many other options. Your nearest sporting goods store might be a 4-hour drive away, and they may be out of the scope that you need, plus you're going to have to invest yourself time in mounting the scope, going out, sighting it in if you can find what you're looking for. That's not an aggravation you need when you're spending money on time with a guide out there. But even as I say, even if it's just for a local, you're only hunting locally for deer or something like that, those are aggravations that you don't need. Do you have to spend $1,000 on a scope, $2,000 on a scope? Absolutely not. Now, if you're a person who, you know, spends a lot of money on luxury items and you can afford it, I suppose there's nothing wrong with spending $2,000 on something that you could get, you know, for $1,000, or maybe spending $1,000 on something you can get for, you know, $500 or $600. If that floats your boat, go right ahead. But we're going to discuss some of the things that might eliminate even those scopes from the search criteria. We're going to try to boil down those 428 selections down to maybe 10 tops. You know, and even then you'll find that you may be focused right in on one or two particular scopes in the search criteria. Okay, so we've discussed first of all quality and price. But what do you get with a mid-price telescope? Mid-price telescopes are that's where your good value is. I'm talking telescopes that are ranging from, you know, $300 up to $450, maybe $600, depending on the optics that you're buying, and the power, the zoom selection, things of that sort. But that range between about $300 and $600 or so. There's a huge selection of good, viable hunting scopes, quality scopes that you can basically invest your resources in, and you're not going to have a scope that's going to let you down. All right. So now, what about shooting style? We'll start from the bottom up. If you're a plinking and small game shooter, I think we pretty much discussed that. If you're a plinking and small game shooter, buy whatever you feel is appropriate for your needs. If you want to have a powerful variable so that you can put it on your 22, go right ahead. Whether it's necessary or not is a moot point. Get whatever you feel that you need to have, but you don't need anything. Basically, all you need is a good, solid sighting device, one that won't float around on you from one shot to another. Most of them do a pretty good job at that. Most of them that are being sold by independent houses like Cabela's and Midway and stuff like that, they have their bargain lines. Sometimes they've got their own name tags on the scope. Those are fine, but again, don't expect them to be excelling in any area. Are you a target shooter? Now, target shooters, what sort of target shooting are we talking about? If you're a bench rest shooter, you're into a highly specialized area of the sport, and perhaps you're only going to be. This is what you do in a bench rest. You're either setting up at 100 yards or 200 yards, and that's it. It doesn't really make any difference what your trajectory is, because once you've sighted in for that specific distance, you're always hitting the target anyway. But for those of you who are into the bench rest game, I direct you to get into the bench rest circuit. Go to a couple of maybe a couple of matches during the spring and summer and see what they do. That's a whole nother category by itself. If you're a target shooter who is an informal target shooter, where you just set out things in the middle of a field or at the range and pop shots at it, that's essentially plinking. Now, as far as for hunting goes, this is where we're calling into play the need for high quality telescopes. These have to be scopes that will suffice for all conditions. They have to excel in all conditions. We're talking about in terms of extreme weather. It could be raining, could be snowing. You could maybe going from the inside of the lodge. It might be 75 degrees with the wood stove burning, and you step outside and it's 5 degrees below zero and the wind is blowing and the snow is driving sideways. That's a scope that has to stand up to that stuff and not even blink. So next thing, what kind of hunting do you do? Are you a big game hunter, or are you a varmint hunter? If you're a varmint hunter, that covers now. Varmint hunting in the old days was nothing more than going out and shooting woodchucks or something like that. But now a lot of people have gotten involved with coyote hunting. Coyotes have pretty much infested the entire continent now, and that's very demanding. A lot of times you're going out in snowy conditions where you're sitting, and you're subjecting your scope to the rigors of the weather, just as you would be doing on a big game hunt. So, but this may call into play criteria which is a little bit different than your big game hunting scope. But if you're a big game, let's go back to big game hunting. Are you a plains hunter? Do you hunt out in Wyoming, Montana, Colorado, out below the Rockies on the eastern slope? Or are you a woods hunter who hunts in the Northeast or in Minnesota, Wisconsin, the Maine or New Hampshire woods, or even down the Carolinas? Well, that's a whole nother thing. Your ranges then are totally different than the ranges that you would experience out west. I've hunted in all those circumstances. I've hunted the Rocky Mountain plain states, and you can expect shots as far as you can see them, and we'll get into that though. So your power criteria for a plains scope is far different than the power criteria for a woodland scope. And then there's the combination scope. That's kind of the area where a lot of hunters want to invest their money in a scope which can be used for all sorts of circumstances, regardless of where they're hunting. They don't want to find themselves constrained with a scope which is of inadequate power to reach out and touch a antelope at 325 yards, but they certainly don't want to have a scope which is so narrow in its field of view that they can't find a fleeting whitetail that's bounding through the woods trying to get away from you. That's a whole specialized. Those are two specialized fields, but there's the combination scope, which is highly desirable. Okay, your rifle characteristics. Now, first of all, let's discuss your rifle characteristics, and you'll see how that will play heavily into what kind of scope that you get. Your rifle characteristics, first of all, your cartridge that you have selected for whatever reason. You know, if you're a guy who likes big bore hunting and you like your 45-70, you have an entirely different criteria than a person who has decided with a 270 Winchester or a 7mm Magnum. The market is flooded right now with, I think, an awful lot of goofy things that a hunter or a shooter simply doesn't need. There was an old adage in sales, you know, the old abiding rule was find a need and then fill it. That's the whole approach to, that's the basic approach to marketing. Find a need and fill it. So, but what we have now is an entirely different concept which has emerged. And it's kind of a new take on the snake oil salesman. It's create a need that they never had to begin with, or create a supposed necessity which they don't have, and then fill it for them. And what you find most in telescopes is exactly that. When you have BDC reticles and range estimating reticles, reticles that inside, you know, look like, I mean, for the most part, some of these scope reticles look like they belonged on a World War II, you know, submarine. What we have is, you know, all these different gradations and striations, laterally, horizontally, sometimes even blinking numbers and pictograms. And, you know, the crosshair seems to be the least important thing inside the scope, inside the field of view. Well, let's approach this from a logical point of view. Do they work? Well, I can tell you, yeah, BDC reticle will work. If you buy a BDC reticle from Nikon or from Loophole, you know, they'll calibrate. You want to write into them and say, you know, I have a 257 Roberts and I shoot, you know, 75 grain Hornady VMAX bullets at 3,500 feet per second, and they have this ballistic coefficient. You can give them exactly what the ballistics of that particular cartridge is, and they'll make a turret for you that'll fit on top of your scope, and so that you can be sure that when you've used your rangefinder, you know, your laser rangefinder that you have, and we'll talk about that. You get your laser rangefinder and you say, well, that deer is at 238 yards away. So you reference your turret and you turn to 238, and bingo. I guarantee you're going to be right on the button as long as your load is as good as you say it is. It's absolutely unnecessary. If you got a 257 Roberts and you're shooting at something at 238 yards away, you don't need any BDC. You don't need any striations on your crosshairs. You don't need to have. You don't even need to have a range-finding pair of binoculars. You don't need anything. As a matter of fact, that rifle is so flat that you can reach out and touch that woodchuck at 350 yards without having any kind of extraneous paraphernalia whatsoever. Have a nice crosshair, lay it on the woodchuck, squeeze the trigger, and that's the end of it. why is that so, and why then are we hyping these? Why are we hyping these BDC reticles and the range estimation reticles and all these other things, and why are we hyping range finders? Well, frankly, because there's money in it, big money. If you look in the Cabela's catalog or in any sporting goods shop, there's a whole section of the store devoted now to this gear. It makes big money for them. I own a rangefinder. The only thing I own the rangefinder is so that I know that my rifle, my 270 for instance, with a 130 grain bullet traveling at 3120, I know that I have a specific range when I'm out hunting in the plains or wherever I'm hunting. I know that my specific range is 390 yards. So if I exceed 390 yards, then I simply don't take a shot. But guess what? I'm not going to be taking a shot in excess of 400 yards on a live creature anyway. I will say unabashedly that I am an expert shot. I'm a professional sniper instructor. I have been shooting rifles all my life. I never miss anything. I've never missed a target in my life. I'm that good. I will say that unabashedly. I'm a fine shot, and I would not take a shot at any animal, a live animal, big game animal, a magnificent creature that God has given us beyond 400 yards, and that's me. Now, I can say absolutely that the average shooter that I have instructed, by the time he's all done with his practice and his instruction and all that stuff, in field conditions, I would not want him to take a shot beyond 275 to maybe 325 yards on game in field conditions under any circumstances. What are field conditions? Well, very simply, if you have a target that's 10 inches square, you can just simply take a piece of cardboard, 10 inches square. Whenever you can hit that piece of cardboard, and don't put bullseyes on it or anything, it's just because animals don't have bullseyes on them. Just take that piece of cardboard that's about the same coloration as a deer. Go and put it out at any range. When you can hit that piece of cardboard from the standing position, the kneeling position, the sitting position, the prone position, 100% of the time, whatever your position is, every shooter should know exactly what his capability is. Just like Clint Eastwood said in Dirty Harry, man has got to know his limitations. I have been subjected ad nauseum to these individuals who on YouTube will, sit there at a bench and they'll declare that they have a MOA gun or they have a sub-MOA gun. They can shoot, so their gun can shoot MOA. Well, that's fine, but I've yet to see a bench sitting out in the prairies of Wyoming where you can, set it up and with your sandbags and all that and squeeze off shots with your arms rested around the stock. That's not field conditions. Field conditions is what you have. You might have sloping ground. I guarantee it's not going to be like a pool table. You have sloping ground. You're going to be shooting uphill, downhill. You're going to be shooting over cover. You're going to be winded. You've been climbing around at maybe 8,000 feet, even if it's in Maine, where you're at almost sea level. You've got cold conditions. You've been hiking up and down hill and dale. Some buck has been dragging you through a swamp. Now he's got you up on a ridge and you're all over the place. Those are field conditions. What it is that you can hit consistently from whatever position that you're assigned by the circumstances, that's your range limitation. That's your natural range limitation. So if I have, for instance, the knowledge that I can stand on my hind legs and consistently hit a 10-inch piece of cardboard at 125 yards without ever missing. But if I go to 130, 140, 150 yards, that I miss 30 or 40% of the time, I've exceeded my range limitation for standing. Now, the average shooter is probably capable of hitting that 10-inch piece of cardboard at maybe 80 yards, 75, 80 yards consistently all the time from the standing position, where perhaps, you know, he's walking through the woods, and there's the deer. He's got no tripod, he's got no bipod, he doesn't have his bench rest. That's it. He's got his shot. He can't drop to a kneeling position because there's scrub oak in the way. He can't lean on a tree because there is no tree. He's got what he's got. If you're a person, that same person may be able to extend his range by another 60 or 70 yards from a sitting or a kneeling position. Maybe he can extend that distance another 150 yards from a prone position if he's well trained. But I guarantee you, unless you know what your capabilities are at each and every from each and every position that you might have to take, if you know that you can't consistently hit a 10-inch piece of cardboard, then don't be thinking that you can just take shots willy-nilly at 400 yards at an antelope when you see him standing out there on the prairie, or when he's moving at Mach 2. These guys are fleet-footed, and I'm not talking about just antelope. We're talking about whitetails that they don't go in a straight line through the woods. They're like a partridge taking off. Even elk can surprise you, big as they are. They move along. When they look as though they're walking, remember, these long-legged critters are, they're hiking along at probably 15 miles an hour when they're just strolling. When you select a rifle, determine what its trajectory is. We have been blessed from the beginning of the 1900s, when we started having, flatter shooting cartridges like the 30-06. The 30-06 was based on, the Mauser design, with the Mauser technology using pointed bullets and everything. We kind of stole technology from the Mauser design when we were getting shot at in the Philippine War by soldiers, Spanish soldiers who were using 7mm Mausers, compared to what we were using at the time, the 30-40 Craig. That was a marked improvement in trajectory, and they were taking us apart. We've had the advantage now since the beginning of the 1900s of having fabulously flat shooting cartridges. Some of the most significant improvements occurred during the 20s with, you had Winchester come out with the 270 Winchester, which is, I think that cartridge will reign as king probably until the end of centerfire cartridges. It's just one of those cartridges, and its sales prove that. That and the 308 and the 3006 top the charts. But what makes the 270 or the 7mm Remington Magnum or the 3006 in some cases, what makes these so-called flat shooting cartridges? Well, what is flat shooting? Flat shooting is, it's not a relative term, it's a specific definition. Flat shooting means any cartridge which has a trajectory such that a point-blank hold on a given target out to the reasonable extended range of that cartridge, a hunting range of that cartridge, will yield a killing shot. So if you have a it doesn't have to be a medium bore cartridge. If say we're talking about a 223, a 223 is by and large it started out its life before the military really got a hold of it. It started its life out with its grandfather, the 222 Remington, the triple deuce. The triple deuce had a range on woodchucks of 225 yards. It was a pretty simple, you could remember that, triple deuce, 222, 222 yards, 225 yards. That meant that, a woodchuck, if he was laying down in the pasture and he's 5 or 6 inches tall, if you held halfway up his rib cage and you squeezed the trigger off, you had a dead woodchuck. It didn't make any difference if he was 25 yards away, 75 yards away, 125 yards away, or 225 yards away. You had a dead woodchuck. You simply held halfway up his body. If he was standing there like a fence post looking at you. You held here, and the bullet hit him here, 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 and here, but it hit him. It always hit him. That's your flat shooting cartridge. Now the 223, you know, with a similar length barrel, with a 22, 24-inch barrel, extends that range perhaps another, you know, 40 or 50 yards. That's flat shooting. You don't have to use BDC. You don't have to use range calibrating reticles, and you don't have to use a rangefinder. You're all set. All you need to do is just shoot at the game, and you got a dead woodchuck. Or shoot at the coyote, you got a dead coyote. That's what's called flat shooting, and it doesn't require any range calibration whatsoever. All you simply need to know is that you're not exceeding the maximum range of that cartridge. So if you've got an 8-inch target, now you've got a maximum, say a coyote, you've got a maximum height above midpoint to a maximum drop below midpoint of 4 inches, 4 inches above, 4 inches below. That's called mid-range trajectory. Mid-range trajectory is not in the middle. So if your target is at 200 yards and your bore is at 0, your mid-range is not at 100. Your mid-range is someplace else, because remember, it's the height where the bullet reaches its apex, above the crosshair, above your point of aim. Your line of sight is what we call it, the LOS. So as you drop your receiver, as you raise your rear sight up, your line of sight, basically in reference to your line of your bore line, your bore line is now elevated so that it's casting the bullet up. I get so furious when I hear it's a tedious thing for a person like me who's been involved with a rifle and pistol instructing all my life to hear people say that bullets rise when they come out of the barrel. They don't rise when they come out of the barrel, they're dropping. Bullets drop. That's all they do, is they come out of the barrel and they're dropping constantly until, just as, you know, any kid knows, if he's out at center field and he catches the ball and he's got to get it to home plate before the guy comes in, he's not throwing it at home plate, he's throwing it to the bleachers, he's throwing it up to the lights, so that by the time the ball gets there, you know, drag and ballistic coefficient have all affected their course, and gravity, and the ball comes into the catcher's mitt. That's something which we do intuitively when we throw a ball. When we hit a golf ball, we're doing the same thing. We're always elevating the trajectory of whatever it is that we're throwing through the atmosphere, so that the drag and the gravitational forces are minimized. Your line of sight is right here. Here's your rear sight, and here's your front sight. Your line of sight is right here, and your target is here. If you cast your bullet up through the line of sight, it crisscrosses right here at this point. This is the first intersection right here. That intersection right there, with most big game rifles, is somewhere around 35 yards or so. Whether you've got a scope or whether you've got iron sights, you just simply are casting. You're elevating the bore. This is our bore here. Your bore line down through the middle. You're casting your bullet up through the line of sight, and eventually it falls back down to earth. And as it falls back down to earth, it's going to cross your line of sight once again. That point out there is called your zero. Let's lower our sights. So basically we're casting it a little bit farther out. So now we're going to cross here, and it's going to fall down through the target right here. Okay? Now if you can see that, you can see how the bullet was passed up through the line of sight one time. So we'll say right here, it just happens to be 36 yards away. Maybe you consult the Sierra bullet chart or something like that, and you know that your velocity of your bullet is X amount, and your ballistic coefficient is such and such, and you you check out what bullet they have, the speed they have, and they tell you that your first intersection will be at 36 yards. Then you find out that that same bullet crosses the zero path. You've decided you want your zero to be 300 yards away. So at 300 yards, you're crossing your line of sight the second time. The first time is at 33 yards or so, and your midpoint trajectory is the highest point right here where it is above the line of sight. Now that could be, I'm not going to specify what cartridge. So this particular, if you're shooting a 22-250, this particular distance here might be an inch and a half, might be 2 inches. This distance out here, 300 yards, and then beyond here, you want to have this replicated. So whatever you have here, 2 inches or 3 inches, whatever you deem is appropriate for your mid-height trajectory, mid-range, then the same thing applies. The same rule applies out here at this range. So if you have a zero at 300 yards, then at some point your maximum point blank range is whatever it happens to be. So we'll call it maybe 335 yards. So you get 33, maybe 200 and a quarter, and then 300, and then this range out here. That right there, my friends, that's your flatness of your trajectory, and that means that you can, no matter where you are along that particular course, your game animal is within range, and your bullet is never going to exceed the height of the animal, and it's never going to drop below the animal. It's as simple as that. You don't need to have any BDC, and you certainly don't need to have range computing reticles, and you don't need to field hunting circumstances. We're not dealing with where you have all these things. You want to pack light. When you're running around the prairie at 7,000 or 8,000 feet and the air is very thin and you're gasping and your lungs are burning, you don't want to be carrying another couple of ounces of weight. You don't want to be carrying around a Harris bipod. To me, that's an abomination. I don't know where we've gotten in our silly society where we no longer have girly men who don't like to learn how to shoot. There's a discipline involved with all things, and there's a discipline involved with shooting. Now, when I was a police sniper, yes, I used a Harris bipod, but I'm shooting at specific distances. I've known for hours, perhaps, that the guy's in that particular building for a long time. I've known, a soldier knows perhaps for days that a guy has been in a bunker for a long time. He knows exactly how far it is, and he can compute exactly where he wants to drop his bullet in, and so he's shooting from a half a mile away or something with his .338 Lapua. Yeah, he's fine, but that's not hunting. That's sniping. And when we carry that sort of mentality into our hunting camps, then we're really handicapping ourselves. I've been in hunting camps, and I've seen the disappointment on guys' faces when they've gone afield. The night before they were at the pool table and they were telling me about all the stuff that they had. Their super long range. They had a beautiful 6mm Remington, and they basically a celestial telescope on top of their rifle with all kinds of side focus and all this stuff, and or adjustable objective, and they got 3 pounds of telescope sitting on top of a pound of iron rings, very expensive rings, and they got their Picatinny rail, they got all this stuff, and with the Harris bipod that extends 48 inches so they can shoot standing up and everything. They realize that's not the way it's done out there. The guides out there, their eyes glaze over when they see that. They really do. They say, maybe if the guy just learned to shoot, he wouldn't need all that crap. Learning to shoot is not a hard thing. It's just a matter of practice, and you don't have to shoot 270s all day long to become proficient. My wife became extremely proficient with her 270 by shooting her Model 582 Remington long rifle. Just shooting, just constantly shooting at small targets. Make the targets as small as you possibly can. Line up Necco wafers on top of a 2x4 at 25 yards, and try knocking those off all the time offhand. with an inexpensive 22. And I can guarantee you, if you can hit little Necco wafers, which are the size of, less than the size of a quarter, at 25 yards consistently, you'll have no trouble at 400 yards, 350 yards on a standing broadside shot on a elk. No problem whatsoever. But for the poor guy who thinks that his shooting practice is nothing more than sitting at a bench and with his Harris bipod, or basically sitting with his back against his Jeep Cherokee while he's leaned there, and he's that's not shooting practice. If you've got a rifle, which I like to carry, a Model 70 featherweight, or with a nice slender barrel, whippy barrel. Not that I like it being whippy, but that's the way it is because it's a lightweight barrel. I like carrying my little Model 7 Remington with a tiny little 18-inch barrel with my 7mm 08. That thing is gorgeous to carry around the woods all day. It's like an elongated handgun. I like my my friend's Model 700 BDL, which has got mountain rifle. That's a piece of cake to carry around. Lightweight cotton sling. I'm really, frankly, everything that weighs something, I leave it at home. So a lightweight, 1-inch cotton sling is far better to me than a 5-inch strap with my name emblazoned on it, and all my club patches. You don't need that stuff when you're going afield. You simply need to have it. Keep it simple, stupid, as they used to say. The next thing is realistic shooter ability. What we discussed a little bit about that. What is your realistic shooter ability? Be honest with yourself. And if you happen to be blessed to be able to go out with a guide, and the guide says, most of them will want to see what they want to see with their own eyes what you're capable of. They'll take you out. Most qualified hunting guides will have a range, or they'll have some place that they'll take you out, and they want to see two things. They want to see how your rifle is sighted in. They want to help you sight it and make sure it's sighted in correctly, whether it was sighted in before you got on your plane and got out there, or whether it needs to be modified for the circumstances out there, or maybe your gun got knocked around. If your gun got knocked around, your scope is no longer correct. That's probably a scope you want to ditch and get another one as soon as you possibly can. But the guides want to see what you can do. They'll have you stand on your hind legs, and they'll say, hit that steel plate out there, hit the gong. Okay, you hit it once, hit it again, or you missed it, forget it. Try the one in close. They won't even ask you the third time to hit it, because they know, well, if you're not able to hit that 12-inch steel gong at 100 yards all the time, that's your limitation, standing on your hind legs. Then you're not capable of shooting it. They're talking a 12-inch gong. You're not capable of hitting that 12-inch gong at whatever range you're shooting at. Then you shouldn't be shooting at real live game at that range, because you don't want to be sticking a bullet through his paunch, and you don't want to be grazing him across the back and leaving a gaping wound so that he basically becomes festered and coyote meat later on. You want to be able to put him down, lay him down, and you don't want to. The guide has no interest whatsoever in slogging through the woods and trying to find an elk that's wandered off with thousands and thousands of other hoof prints on the ground where they can't track them. If you think you can track an elk in the prairie, I got news for you. When you see an elk's print on the prairie, you're witnessing. It looks like it was Woodstock just cleared out. There's footprints everywhere. So now what we have is we've decided that you know what your maximum range is, honestly, and from different positions. If you're in the prairie, it's perfectly all right to take a sitting position. Learn how to shoot sitting down. Learn how to shoot kneeling. Learn how to shoot prone. Those are the kind of positions that you take in the field, just like the infantryman is taught. Learn to shoot from those positions with nothing more than just the rifle and you. Learn to adjust your sling into a hasty sling so that you can basically whip yourself into position in a hurry and get your shot off. Nothing is more frustrating for me than to watch this modern culture of shooters on the Outdoor Life channel, and these different programs you have on the cable. when I watch somebody who is sitting in some plush blind, you know, they got everything there. They got the refrigerator, they got the card table, they got a window with a windowsill, and they, you know, got the shades, they got the, you know, flowers on the wall, and they're sitting in there and they're waiting, you know, for deer, and that's not, to me, that's hunting. That's not hunting. That's sniping. If that's your kind of hunting, if that's what floats your boat, that's fine. But that's not. That's not. You can take any kind of gun into that scenario, because most of the time, the guides actually have. They will tell you, well, if you see that tree out there, that tree is 165 yards away. You see that section of the field out there, that's 250 yards away. They already can tell you, because that house has been there for the last 3 generations, so they know. But that's not the kind of hunting I'm talking about. The kind of hunting I'm talking about is where you're wandering through the woods and all of a sudden you see a buck bounding through, and he's not stopping at 50 yards, he's not stopping at 75, he's not stopping at 150. He's continually changing his range, and he's going from one place to another, and your assigned task is to nail him wherever you can possibly shoot him. Now, does it help if you go to a range that has, you know, like running bore targets and stuff like that? No. You know, anybody knows when they go to these running bore targets or something like that, that they start them on a trolley from one side to the other. You know, you can't see them here and you can't see them here, but they appear in the middle. So everybody knows they basically hold their gun until they see it come out of the corner of their eye, and they squeeze the trigger and they know they're going to hit them. That's not learning how to shoot moving game. That's timing your shot. What my recommendation is, go to a place that has a trap field, you know, all traditional trap field, where you have the trap house 16 yards out in front of you, or 21 yards out in front of you. Take a modified pattern shotgun with some number 7.5, and go out there and see how many times you can clean up a box of 25. That's, to me, you know, you don't know where those birds are going. They're gonna be going out sometimes straight away from you. They're gonna be going out, you know, right. They're gonna be going out left. They're gonna be going out in all these different directions. Also, the thing oscillates up and down. The arm is oscillating up and down, so you don't know what trajectory it's coming out. You got wind currents. So as the bird is flying out there, all of a sudden it bobbles, and it's no longer where your bead was. That's what a deer does. That's what a rabbit does. That's the kind of thing. Take up small game hunting. Go out rabbit hunting if you got rabbits in your area. Then you'll learn how to shoot deer. 'Cause, you know, and you don't have tomorrow to do this. There was a program on. I stopped watching it because it's nothing more than frustrating. Where you see a shooter sitting there, and a deer appears, and he's coming through the trees, and I don't know why he's not already dead yet. But he's coming through the trees, and you hear the tantalizing music and everything, and the lead-up music, and you see the person's eyes looking, and they're getting the gun up, and they're focused. Oh boy! And they're looking above the scope, and finally they get the scope, and then they go to commercial break, you know, and then they advertise Verizon Net and you know, Budweiser beer, and then they come back, and then the person's still, yeah, shoot him, yeah, go ahead, shoot him, yeah, go ahead, no, shoot, no, okay, wait now until he comes up behind it, no, okay, Mark. Shoot him. Oh, he's gone. Well, naturally he's gone. You know, deer are not programmed to wait around for you while you fiddle around with your trigger and try to figure out when you're going to shoot. Jack O'Connor used to always write in his books, shoot, just shoot, that's all. Just shoot, now. You don't have a time between now and later. It's just shoot now. You have to learn how to immediately stroke that trigger to the rear. When I say stroke it to the rear, squeezing a trigger, when you become a competent shot, squeezing a trigger does not take time. It's what you call, whew. You stroke the trigger to the rear, and it can be done very rapidly without jerking the trigger. But you've got to learn, practice these regimens, practice these disciplines until they become second nature. Forget cowboy action shooting. All you're learning to do is to shoot quickly and to load quickly. That's not a real game situation. You have to learn how to shoot at all different ranges, at animated targets. Shooting at things that are 20 yards away all the time steel circles, that's not going to teach anybody how to be a good game shot. So now that brings us to optical power and field of view. This really gets people stymied when they look at all the different scopes. 428 scopes in this Cabela's catalog. There's probably only 6 of them in there that are worth considering for the average hunter, or for that matter for any big game hunter. Scope selection should not ever be based upon the highest power when you're talking about a big game scope. If you're talking about a varmint scope, the sky's the limit. If you want to do a dental check on a prairie dog at 300 yards, fine. But that's not the type of a scope that you're looking at for a big game scope. If you're looking for a big game scope, don't look at the high power. Look at the low power. If you're a eastern shooter, and when I say eastern shooter, I'm talking about dense woods, woods where a shot might present itself 15 yards away, maybe 10 or 12 yards away. The deer is suddenly there where he wasn't before, and if you put an aluminum tube up there and you can't find him, it's all over. He's gone. You're going to say, oh gee, I missed him. The old days, the Weaver K1.5, that was the scope. Anybody who was a deer hunter, a K1.5 or K2, K2.5, something like that, low power, where you had nothing but field of view and a crosshair, field of view, crosshair. That's all you need, point of aim and a lot of field of view, unobstructed. You want to be able to find that deer as he's flying through the woods. So if you have your high power and your low power, they work off of each other. As you go up in high power, it drags your low power up with it. Be realistic. Assign yourself a scope which will have a wide field of view at the bottom. What is the top field of view? Well, in any scope that has a 1.5 power at the bottom end, you got 5 power at the top, or even maybe perhaps a little bit better than that. Even if it's 4.5 power at the top, that's more than adequate. Absolutely more than adequate for that occasional shot across a potato field at the end of the day in Maine, or it's more than adequate for a shot when you're coming out in the middle of the day to sit on the power line and gaze up the wood line. 5 power shooting at a deer at 300 yards or 325 yards from a kneeling position, you got yourself one heck of a platform for taking a deer. You don't need to be examining the deer close up. All you need to do is be able to assign a good hold on the game and know that your crosshair is bisecting that theoretical. What I like to say is that, remember always that a deer, or we always talk about deer here, if it's something bigger, it's a bigger ball, but a deer has basically a basketball inside his brisket. You're shooting always for the middle of that basketball. So your 5 power scope is all that you need under those circumstances. You got your low power range and you got your high power range. Now, so this is a woodland hunter. What if you're a prairie hunter? You're hunting mule deer and antelope. Well, the same conditions really apply, because not all your shots are going to be at 250 yards. You're going to have those shots where all of a sudden an antelope comes up from out of they have swales in Wyoming. They have these low gullies. And I've had those circumstances where all of a sudden, it looks like a flock of birds coming up. Suddenly you have 15 antelope come up, and they're only 50 or 60 yards away from the other side of a hollow, from basically a natural depression. You're coming up the other side, and then all of a sudden they fly up out. Well, you don't want to have too constrained a field of view in those circumstances either. So, but they're probably not going to be it's not going to be 30 yards away like you would have in the woods. 2.5 power, maybe 3 power is adequate for that. Well, that gives you a top end of 9 to perhaps 12 power. Would I go for a 4 to 12? No, probably not, because I know that the circumstances out there predicated on high altitude, thin atmospherics. You know, it drags on your lungs unless you were brought up in those states. But you know, you don't need 12 power. You know, 3 to 9 is an ideal scope for that particular rifle. Now, what if your last criteria is your combination gun? If you're a combination shooter, you know, you hunt in the east, and occasionally you get on a plane, or you drive out west and you hunt out there, and you don't want to buy, you don't want to buy a specialized rifle for both endeavors. Well, just get yourself a good 2.5 to 8 power scope. But 2.5 to 8 is fine. You still got 2.5 power at the low end, where you have a reasonably broad field of view, and you have 7.5 or 8 power at the top end. And I've taken most of my game that I've taken out west, and it's been a bunch of it, has been with 7.5 or 8 power. 7.5 or 8 power, you can nail any deer. If you can shoot at 390 yards with your 270, if you're that good a shot, if you can shoot at 390 yards with your 270, it's capable of it, and you won't be sacrificing anything whatsoever. Your crosshairs won't be covering his body or anything. You'll be able to place your shot exactly where you want. Basically, you're just shooting to the middle of his brisket. He's got I assigned my 270. It's basically, I have 5 inches below and 5 inches above my line of sight. Well, that gives me almost 400 yards of what you call point blank range, and I don't have to have BDC, and I don't have to have all kinds of striations that look like, you know, the stripes on a rear admiral sleeve. You don't need that stuff. And I've had people ask me, well, I'm going to buy it anyway because I can afford it. You know, it's only another $30 or $40 more. Maybe it's the same price. No, that's not the way to look at it, because what you're doing is, if you take a BDC and you do it the way the manufacturer tells you, you've got to assign specific ranges to certain positions on that dial. Now that means that you don't have your scope sighted in anymore, so that you're doing like I showed you, where you're casting your bullet up through a known trajectory at the beginning, which falls down through at the end at a 0. Instead, what you have is these calibrated points of trajectory, which are assigned to a BDC reticle or to a, stripes on a scope, that you have to somehow take time to figure out. And for anybody who thinks that they have time, when there's a mule deer that's scurrying along through the prairie, and he's only perhaps going to take a short momentary stop, they bing, 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 they bounce. And every now and then, about every 15 bounces, they'll stop and they'll look around. And that's when you shoot. Now, you don't have time to sit there with your rangefinder and to compute that you have, 246 yards of shooting, and then dial it in on your twirl it on the top of your scope. And you don't have time to try to figure out which one is those little dots down there. Oh, let's see, the loophole said the 4th dot down is 250 yards. You don't have time to do that. And you don't want to have all that clutter in your scope either. All you need to have, as we discussed over and over again, is a flat shooting rifle with a known point blank range, that the bullet is always within your assigned latitude of elevation and drop, and that's all you need. Your reticle pattern. What sort of reticle should you choose? Well, my old favorite years ago was when I had a Bosch and Lomb that had a tapered reticle. It was thick on the outside, and then it tapered, almost disappeared in the middle, top and bottom. Tapered reticles, you don't see them much anymore, because I understand that they were rather expensive to produce, and for the most part, people tended to gravitate towards the duplex style reticle, which is the thick bars on the outside, and then some combination of thin crosshairs in the middle. And they work fine, because they do two things. They do the most important thing, which is to capture your eye. They tend to center your eye down into the middle crosshair. So even though the middle crosshair may disappear in the woods as you're tracking a deer, it doesn't make any difference, because those larger crosshairs will, just like a peep sight, just like a ghost ring, will tend to center your image where the crosshair is at that range, within those short ranges. So I guess my recommendation virtually 100% of the time would be either the tapered crosshair, if you can find it, or the duplex reticle. Either one are fabulous. Now, there are other types of specialized crosshairs which are very good for the circumstances. You know, you got your ultra-fine crosshairs which are used by varmint shooters and target shooters. So if you've got a 257 Roberts or a 6mm Remington or a 243 or something, or a 22 250 that you do nothing but shoot prairie dogs with, or woodchucks with, or you know you're doing nothing but shooting stationary targets, or you're a dedicated bench rest shooter, I'd say, you know, perhaps you don't even need to have variable. You know, you can get by with a static scope, which, you know, probably save you 30 or 40%. I did a lot of woodchuck shooting for many years with a 16 power loophole with very fine crosshairs. I don't think they make that model anymore, but that was, and then they came out with a 24 power. Same thing, ultra fine crosshairs. Sometimes you put the little dot in the middle. The little dot is helpful to some people. Now, illuminated reticles, I never found a situation once where I needed to have illuminated reticle. You know, this is where they sometimes sell you something based on a supposed need which doesn't really exist. If you can't see your crosshairs because it's so dark, then what are you shooting at? Some of this stuff you have to use a little bit of your noggin. You know, you have to say, you know, if you can't see your game, well, how are you going to see your crosshair? So you illuminate your crosshair, but you still can't see your game. I don't quite get the point. If you can illuminate your game, then you see your crosshair. Well, anyway, that's it. And more than anything else, if I can say one thing with scopes, less is more. I hope that maybe I have, you know, strained all those scopes down through a coarse and progressively finer sieve, so that you can see that there's 428 scopes. Basically boils down to maybe 5 or 6 in the catalog. You can zip right through it. Get a good quality scope, but don't go nuts. Don't buy anything less than that, because you're going to be buying garbage. Buy anything more than that, and you're going to an excessive extreme, which will buy you nothing more. You're not out celestial stargazing. You know, you have extremely good quality optics on a mid-range scope, and you've got extremely good lens coatings, you know, that prevent lens flare. That's one other thing I forgot to mention. Scopes that don't have good quality lens coatings on them will cause no end of problems if you should be facing in the direction of the sun, or towards areas where, you know, you have reflections. Sometimes you can get reflections down through trees that are breaking up into light rays that will come into your scope. Lens coatings, good quality lens coatings that you'll find on your top grade scopes, you know, like your Bushnells, loopholes, Nikons, and, you know, all those scopes. Those scopes there have got good quality lens coatings on them. Make sure that your scope says it has good quality lens coatings, because if they don't say, I guarantee you they're not giving you. You know, this is one of those industries where they don't give you any more than they tell you they're going to give you. If they say they have good quality lens coatings, they do, if it's a reputable company. But that's why you don't want to buy junk. So that's it. I hope that you shoot often and you shoot well.